Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. Her favourite character on Game of Thrones is Arya Stark, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Yes, I told you I'd be doing solo mini-sodes every fortnight. However, I wanted to bring this chat to you sooner while it is fresh and relevant. And it's not so much an interview with a facilitator. It's a reflection conversation that I shared with my co-facilitator, Adam Mustoe, following our presentation at the Clifton Strengths Conference. I figured that if I waited to bring this to you, it could be a couple of months old and, well, not so much relevant. And as we know, adult learners love relevance. If you've been listening to the show for some time, you'll know that Adam Mustoe and I actually met on this podcast. And through some cool turn of events, we wound up presenting together at the Gallup Summit in Omaha last month. Now, I won't give you all the details of how we got the gig because we talk through that as part of this. Actually, hold up, Jerry. If you have been listening to this show for some time, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you listening to this show, and I hope you're getting value out of it. There's hundreds of thousands of other shows and other things you could be doing. So I really do value you tuning in. And hey, if this is the first time you've picked up the show, there is a first time for everything, as we know. So welcome along. So this episode is a very different style that I've done. It's the first time I've recorded a post-workshop or post-presentation reflection. The good news is Adam and I don't hold back. Before we hit the record button, we started to talk through things about the feedback and our experience. And then we're like, no, we're going to wait until we hit the record button. And then we're going to share and unload everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly as part of this conversation and let you into that. So it was really great reflecting on such a wonderful experience. And I hope you get some value from this one. Where it was particularly valuable for me was talking through the feedback we received post-event. And I think the conversation we had around this towards the tail end of this recording will resonate with some of you out there. I will link to everything Adam does and also post up some pictures of our experience in the show notes for this episode at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 75. Now, if you want to stay in touch with the show when the conversation is over, join the free community of first-time facilitator listeners on Facebook. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. And we'd love to talk to you there. There's such a global community of facilitators on there. It's pretty awesome. Okay, now on to the show. Welcome back to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Adam Mustoe.
Thank you. Happy to be here again.
Yeah, it's so good to have you here. And I've had a lot of people reach out since we spoke in Omaha. It was about a month ago to the day that we're recording this. And you can't see, if you're listening in, you can't see Adam's amazing 4th of July shirt that he's rocking. Do you want to sort of share what it looks like, Adam, with our listeners?
I was operating under the assumption this would be audio only. This, my friends, is the eve of the 4th of July, the American Independence celebration, with stars and stripes and bald eagles and fireworks. And they're all, just take it all in. Oh, yeah. So my wife only lets me wear this shirt 1 to 2 times a year. So this is it.
And we've got it on video as well. And we'll take a screenshot, put it in the show notes for this one. But this is, like I said, Adam, even before we started recording, this is a really sort of relaxed conversation. I thought I'd get Adam on so we could talk about our experience co-facilitating. We didn't really know each other. We'd met through the podcast. You, the listener, would have heard that conversation, quite a few episodes ago. We met up the day before in Omaha. I think we only had an hour Skype presentation, between us before we even sort of submitted. Do you want to talk listeners through even the process? Let's just start from, let's go chronological order.
Sure.
After the interview that Adam and I did, he kept saying, oh, Leanne, you need to get over for the Strengths Conference. It's awesome. And I was like, yeah. And I was at the back of my mind thinking, this will never happen. America, never.
Australian. You do the polite, yeah, that'd be fun, and then you're not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, yeah. And then I think, what happened then? Did you sort of reach out and say, hey, the call out for speakers is on? What happened?
Yeah, so we got an email saying that they're kind of taking a casting call if you want to submit a proposal for a workshop. And I thought, I've been wanting to collaborate with my friend Leanne again, so this would be a good way to do that. And so we had like, it was only 2 or 3 days, I feel like, to get it in. So we had a flurry of Facebook messages and emails go back and forth. And I think you and I both kind of had some content in our back pocket, but decided how it would best kind of be smashed together. And we got it sent off. I think that was in October. And then in December, we actually found out that they bought it and we got in.
They bought it. And it's so funny. Actually, you give me a lot of credit, but I've got to say 90% of the work was done by Adam in terms of that proposal. So he went through my blog. He did as much work as he could to make it easy for me, which I was so grateful for. I pretty much had this crafted, beautiful, submission ready to go. I just had to add a bit of information about me, sign it. And so it was all your work.
One of my few skills is submitting written projects on a short deadline because I would always wait to do them in college. And so let's call that making up for being a slacker in group projects all the way through high school and college. I have now tried to redeem myself by being the workhorse to get it submitted to the officials.
That means that I was the person letting the team down, but thank you for pulling through.
We decided, what is there to lose? An email saying that we didn't get in, like it's a no lose. So it was, I remember the day that I found out we got in, I was in my car when I checked my email, and I remember just like pounding on the steering wheel, like in victory. And there was a lot of capital letters and a lot of exclamation points used when we were messaging back and forth.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I remember the time I got it because I was in my office. I just got a coffee. I'd opened up my emails and I was waiting for a sign from the universe to say, what's your decision on your corporate job? And then this email came through saying we'd made it. And I was like, what am I doing in this job? I've got to leave. And I rang you on Facebook. Yeah. And you'd never received a call on Facebook before.
I felt so old. I was like, you can call me through the Facebook? Okay. Yeah, and that was a really big deal. That kind of signaled a career change for you. So I don't want this to be too self-indulgent, but for me, it was so fun, and we can get to this later, but it just proved to me that the internet isn't all bad. There's so much dysfunction and venom and contempt online, and our whole ability to collaborate like across time zones and the globe is amazing. And so the magic of the internet won the day. And it was just really cool how it all came together.
It's such a great story. And you did share that as part of our presentation, how we actually met. And it was very unconventional as opposed to everyone else there that was co-presenting that obviously had formed a relationship over the years. But we were just sort of brought in together. And I think we delivered. So in terms of presentation, so Gallup really wanted the slides back so early. Was it March or April? Like months before.
April 15th. That's tax day here in the United States.
Yeah. That's really tough. I don't know. How did you find submitting slides so early?
I thought it forced us to work things out. So I thought working on a deadline was advantageous in a way, but it didn't give us a lot of wiggle room leading up to it because we had to do it pretty early on.
Yeah, that's right. And that's sort of in the way that I designed my slides was just to keep it at a high level because I didn't know where I was going to go with it. So I think that was both of our strategies. Actually, just jumping straight into some of the feedback, someone said the slides were average, but the presenters were great. And I thought that's legitimate. Right. That is legitimate.
Yeah, I read that too and was like, that's probably about right. I think you might have been more charitable. I think they said the slides were not great, but the presenters were. They had us submit stuff in like this kind of template format. And they really wanted to keep it no more than 13 slides. So I think you and I both tried to fit our stuff into their little text boxes and bubbles and stuff. So for me, the slides are kind of like whatever. I shouldn't say that. It's an important piece of the presentation, but I didn't lose a lot of sleep over somebody saying they didn't want to print off our slides and frame them in their dining room.
No. And I think that's what we were sort of proving. It was that the delivery can trump it. If you've got good presenters that are engaging, that can tell stories, the slides aren't really that important. And we rarely sort of even reference them. I think it was just maybe to show some of the models and some key phrases. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And then we didn't really, between April and then when I hopped on a plane to the States, we sort of had a couple of conversations, but nothing really about content. Then we met for the first time at the airport, which was a success.
The Omaha airport. Yeah, it was.
And went straight and had lunch in a Midwest pub and spoke through what we're going to do. We had 45 minutes to talk through. What was our process? What do you remember from that?
I remember the proposal that we submitted had a pretty detailed outline. So you and I just kind of breezed over it. What I think would be helpful for your listeners to know is that, we didn't ask each other to really go too into detail on our portions. We mostly just focused on who was going to do what. And really the word would be like trust, that you were going to do your thing and I was going to come through on mine just like you were. And we were just going to get up there and trust that the other one wouldn't, I don't want to say let the other one down, but there were very little assurances beyond blind trust and optimism.
Yeah, it must be that positivity shining through that we've both got in our top 5. But I'd also, I just from even having the conversation with you on the podcast and seeing the way that you operated without even knowing you, I felt that I could trust you. It wasn't that hard to trust you because you'd already delivered every single time.
Well, and likewise, I was familiar with your work, and, my assumption was you didn't fly from, another continent to not do your best. So
yeah.
We both kind of, like I said, had that optimism that we were going to know our stuff. And so we really didn't need a whole lot more than 45 minutes because it was just kind of that high level, make sure we got timing down. And I do think at that meeting that you brought several things that ended up making a big difference in terms of engaging with people right away. You had a couple things that we didn't script everything out, but you told me that you were going to kind of call out or toss it to me a few times. I remember it took me a minute to get the difference between open and closed questions correctly. I don't know if you remember that. But I thought the subtle tweaks that you kind of came with, I think ended up being really important. And I think you can see that on the feedback. People said they had good interplay. People were very sensitive to how we respected one another's time, I felt like. On the feed, people picked up on that. They're very aware if a man talks over a woman.
Oh, I didn't pick that up on the feedback.
I did a couple times.
Yeah. There's one sort of feedback point that I wrote down, and I thought I'd call it out in this section, but it says these two were perfectly paired for a presentation. Well, that was a really beautiful feedback, considering, again, it shows that you don't need to really have a pre-existing relationship with someone to co-facilitate really effectively.
Yeah, there were several there that noted the dynamics and interplay. I thought that made me feel really good.
So talk us through the 30 minutes before we're about to hit the stage. Where were you?
I had skipped my previous workshop just to not be kind of trying to escape the crowd and get into our room on time. We were in the afternoon, the second day of the conference. And I remember just looking over my stuff. I use an iPad that I have everything scripted out on. It's a bit of a security blanket. I certainly don't just read to people, but I know if I get in a tight spot, that's kind of my ripcord. I've got that ready to go. And I remember you and I were able to walk actually in the space just for a little bit earlier at lunch, but there was a session in our room right before ours. So we didn't have a ton of time. But at that point, you have some nerves, but for me, it was like the feeling when you're next in line to get on the roller coaster ride or something. It was just going to be fun.
That is the perfect way of summing that up, that feeling. And it's funny because you took a break to have some space. I actually wanted to get distracted and have other thoughts in my head. I didn't want to spend another hour thinking about it because I was just working myself up. So I just went to another session. But it slightly distracted me, but I was still thinking about what we were about to do next. And I think the best thing about what we did when we got into that room before everyone arrived, and it's a tactic that you use every Sunday or every time you've got a service, is actually welcoming people when they walk in. How good was that?
Oh, what was great was, you and I aren't, well, I won't speak for you. I'm not some big deal. Nobody knows who I am. So
likewise.
People just thought we were being friendly at the door. And so it was fun because we tried to shake everybody's hand, thank them for coming and encouraging them to have a seat and that we were looking forward to getting started. And we would trade off as people came in and you could see them kind of like, oh, okay, they're being nice. This is nice. And I think that's that personal touch that makes a difference. It also, from a relevancy to your subject matter here on the podcast, it shows people that we're not doing last minute prep. We're prepared and we have that space to be present and welcoming and not flipping through our slides, which were mediocre. And I think that's really important. You need to be, what's the old adage? If you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And similarly, like if you're prepping 30 minutes or some amount of time before your actual thing, you're under the gun. You need to pretend like your start time is actually earlier than it is.
Yeah, love that. And that's all about demonstrating credibility in your skills as a professional facilitator without actually telling people that you are. It's actually just through that act of, hey, don't need to look at my notes last minute. I'm all about you now. I'm shifting my focus. It's all about the participants. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, then it was showtime.
Yeah, it was.
You got laughs within like the first minute. I think because the activity Adam was alluding to earlier with a bit of interplay was we wanted to find out the length of experience people in the audience had with facilitation. So we got everyone to stand up and sit down, if you had one between, if you were a newbie to facilitation, and then Adam, I'd throw to you and you'd say something along the lines of, I'm throwing to you now.
Again, I thought it was great to get everybody moving. And that was one of the ideas you had when we had lunch, like a day earlier or whatever it was. So I thought that worked out really well. And I think it's very important for people to see that you can take your subject matter seriously without taking yourself too seriously. And I think, when we have people up there in Wonder Woman poses and stuff, like, this isn't going to be a stodgy hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah, set the tone.
So I thought that was really good.
Awesome.
The opening stuff was all your idea. That was one of those little tweaks I mentioned earlier that I thought made a big difference.
Yeah. And then I guess the question that we had for each other as well before we kicked off was, okay, well, where am I going to stand when you're going? And that was a bit like, because I think for a length of time, like I had the time and then you had the time for like 15 minutes each. And so we're just sort of standing out there. How did you feel about that?
And there was also a big podium right in the middle.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an interesting factor. They sent us some pictures afterwards, and you can definitely see us like trying to casual in the background, somewhat unsuccessfully. At least you're very graceful in whatever you do. I kind of looked like a gargoyle at one point, I felt. But, you're just trying not to be in the way. I think I made a joke about not trying to appear like Donald Trump behind Hillary Clinton infamously in one of the debates. So I thought we made the best of it. And I don't think hopefully nobody's looking at the person not talking anyway. It's one of those things where you just got to kind of get over yourself and understand not everybody's going to be really even looking at you when it's not your turn.
Yeah, that's right. And it's actually a nice moment to sort of, like while you were talking, I was sort of getting the opportunity then to glance around the room and see who was involved and what their body language was doing. And it seemed to me that the energy felt really great. Did you feel that as well? Did you feel good energy in the room?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the cool things about the summit is you're there with everybody who loves the stuff as much as you do. And the next day I went to a session and I remember going up to the person afterwards and be like, hey, you did a great job. And they're like, oh gosh, you too. I was in yours yesterday. We were all peers. So I think everybody's rooting for you when you're up there. That's what I was feeling like. Like it was cool because we were practitioners sharing with other practitioners. And I think that to me, to label the energy was the way I felt. And we're all just excited about this approach to work and life, and everybody's excited to talk about it. So that was palpable for me.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the workshop, we, because it was kind of a curse being the last on the day because we had to wait so long, but it was also a blessing because then everyone could hang out and talk to us. And there were lines of people. We were there for quite some time. How good was that?
It was fun. I met a guy who had the same 5 strengths as I did.
So that was really I remember cool. Him. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a big rush, so that was good. And we got to really dig into people's questions or some immediate feedback and kind of continue a conversation for a pretty long time if folks were wanting to. So yeah, that accessibility I thought was really neat. Did you remember anybody specific that you talked to or anybody that brought something up in particular?
Just had some lovely feedback. Some people wanting to talk about Australia, which was awesome. A lady was very complimentary. She's like, I'm a public speaking coach and you two just have it. You've got it. And I was like, that is amazing to hear that from someone that has done this for a living for decades. She was just complimenting on very specific feedback, which was amazing.
And to hear that from a practitioner, like you said, is very validating.
And then someone brought up, because you got communication, that's number 1 for you, isn't it?
Number 4.
Number 4. It feels like you would have it at number 1, but
I'm trying not. It feels like it on this podcast for sure. I'm trying not to talk about it.
And I shared that communication was number 23 for me, but we talked about how you can use your other strengths to complement And so a lady came up to me at the end. She's like, oh my gosh, communication's like number 22 for me. I've always used that as an excuse to not get up in front of people. What you have said has just inspired me, and thank you so much. So that was very powerful.
Yeah, and that's something you remember. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And then, so we're in this high. We had a great night. It was a great conference. Met some great people. Then, I shouldn't say then, but yeah, then we got the feedback. Feedback came through from Gallup the other day, which he sent through. So what was your process of looking at that document?
First, I emailed and Facebook messaged you with a lot of capital letters and exclamation points. And then, I poured over it immediately. The other people in my office heard me like exclaim out loud because I'd been really wanting to dig into this because, like we said, the cool part about doing this with your peers is they're rooting for you. And then I guess we'll see what they actually thought. You kind of get the real talk because just so everybody knows, Gallup is a survey corporation. So, of course, they want you to do a survey at their event about the workshop you just went to. So it was all in an app, and it was anonymous and very quick and very seamless. I thought the way they integrated it was really cool. So I think I counted we had 74 responses.
Yeah, and I think the room capacity was around 200.
Yep, you got it. So went through, I immediately scrolled down and looked at our 1 through like our quantifiable scores. And then on the right of the spreadsheet was all the places people could point out where they had specific feedback. Oh yeah, and just poured over it immediately. Like I said, it's even interesting because in our workshop, I think you and I referenced 3 or 4 times, like, we'll find out when you give us your feedback, because we joked and sort of tried to highlight the irony of speaking about public speaking. If it didn't go well, our credibility was shot, because why would they listen to anything we had to say if we didn't do a good job? So I was really interested to hear what folks had to say. What did you think?
Yeah, I did similar strategy. So the first thing I did was look at the averages right at the bottom. I've even got them written here. So I think so it was 1 to 5, 5 being exceptional, 1 being poor. We were all like 4.5 and above, which was awesome. So, but our highest was, how did you rate the presenters? So we got 4.79, which is pretty incredible, I think.
It is.
And the lowest, but it's not even that low, the organisation of the presentation, 4.58. And I think that comes down to all the information. Like, we tried to get so much information through because we wanted to help people so much. Yeah. And there was some good feedback there about maybe cut back on the topics and go into a deep dive. And I agree with that. But that's still pretty awesome. Like, our marks are amazing.
I was very happy. I'm trying not to make this a total self-congratulatory experience. But yeah, I was very pleased. And I think there's a few lessons I learned from this. I'm looking at the sheet now. I think some people said, we didn't even really have time to do the stuff you asked us to. We moved along too quick. I think that's a fair criticism. Some of this is unavoidable, because if we didn't cover a lot, people would be like, well, I felt this was pretty specific and should have been more broad, or I would have loved to hear more from the person. So if you lean the other way, we probably could have gotten some feedback that was the opposite.
I know. And then the second part, I agree with you there. The second part was I looked at the averages, and then the next thing I did, I don't know if this is just me, but I looked for the lowest scores. Did you?
Yep. What I did was I went over and looked at people's comments on the right, and then I looked at their scores. So I tried, like, if there was something that wasn't, sunshiny, I would kind of go back and say, okay, how did they rate us? That was my little correlation of, let me look at what they said and then see what they quantified that as.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I've been thinking about it as well. And it's just interesting about what people gravitate to. So I think 80% of the comments were both like very positive towards both of us. And then there was like a split in the middle. It was like, Leanne was great. Adam was great. Adam was way more authentic. And then I'm thinking, maybe I'm not. Like, the problem is, like I said, 80% were super favorable. But then I was then focusing on that person that was like, Leanne, it felt like if you're saying that you're authentic, that I'm not, then I was thinking, how am I not authentic? Like, what could I have done? And it's funny, out of all that feedback, I'm focusing on one cell in that spreadsheet.
Yeah. Let's give the people the real story here. Let me read 2 for you. Yeah. Right? Adam was much more authentic and engaging. I wish the presentation would have given each equal time. Okay, so there's kind of some thoughts. 2 cells down. Read this one. Leanne Hughes was amazing. Adam Mustoe was a grandstanding, arrogant bore. I feel sad that Leanne traveled all the way across the Pacific to be sidelined by yet another white dude bloated with self-importance. So
My heart dropped when I read that.
we can break that down a little bit. We don't need to focus on that. To me, the takeaway was you've got 80% that are across the board positive. And here are two very specific that have totally opposite theses or whatever. You cannot please everyone.
I logically know it. And I've talked to facilitators on the show. We talk about it all the time about feedback. You know, you might get 5-star, then you get because what we're talking, it's actually not even 80%. It's probably 95% is overwhelmingly positive. And you and I are focusing on the 2.5% each. And I know, so rationally, I know not to, but it's still okay, I know this, but how am I going to process this? And I don't want to give it any more airplay or time, but then it still keeps sort of what could I have done better?
Yep. And I think that's really representative of the heart of the movement we were there to represent, right? Which is don't necessarily obsess over the smaller amount of things that might reveal a weakness. It's so easy to just go straight there, approach that feedback through the lens of the bulk of the feedback, which was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
We have this tendency to just focus on the negative stuff, man. I definitely felt that as well. And we try not to joke about this too much before we actually started taping or whatever, but I don't think I've lost a lot of sleep over that. But I will say I consider myself a pretty thick-skinned person. Harmony is number 32 for me. So
it's like 31 for me.
And I'll say, even I was like, ooh, there's that. I don't know if you've seen the meme with Chris Tucker and Ice Cube. That to my buddy. It's from a movie called Friday from the 90s. It's like a 30-year-old reference at this point. But there's this meme where they both are like, damn! And when I read that, that's, even as a low harmony person, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
So, and here's the thing. This had no professional bearing. You and I didn't get paid to do this. We're like volunteers, basically. No one from my church is going to it has no bearing on my professional life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shouldn't bother me to the extent that it easily could. So that to me is one takeaway is you got to be careful what you ask for with feedback, because if you really want to know what people think, one of the things I learned in another workshop was feelings are facts. Even though I would sit here and say, how could she call me, or how could this person call me arrogant when I told a story about ripping my pants? When you and I repeatedly said that we were nervous to present in front of people, and when at the end we totally focused on a time where we had blown it, and multiple people were like, I appreciated their vulnerability.
Yes, that's right.
The data shows, I don't know how I could be arrogant and self-important.
No.
But it doesn't matter, because that's how that person perceived that part. So I don't want to focus in on that too much, because if I focus on someone calling me self-important and bloated, if I do that a lot on this podcast, that means I might be. So we need to move on.
No, it's good. I just wanted to have that conversation just so, I don't know if listeners, especially first-time facilitators who are trying to get the confidence, and then sometimes just want them to know that even experienced people like you and I can get this feedback and we still sort of go through this process. The thing is, for me, that kind of feedback is interesting, but I would have loved to have a two-way conversation on it. And that's why coaching conversations where you can ask and clarify questions like, okay, you said that's fine. Absolutely. Can you tell me what was it that was inauthentic that you felt? The opportunity to ask back would be awesome. But I agree. Let's move on. So
done and done.
Yeah.
Moving on.
What are you? Yeah, I think that was the compelling thing is you can't control what people feel about you. And I think what was really great about our feedback as well was people loved the tools that we shared as part of the presentation as well. And I think that was something that you suggested was getting all we could to make sure that people had something to do as soon as they left the workshop, having some practical tools. And I think that was definitely something that stood out in the feedback.
Eminently applicable.
Ah, great phrase.
Active immediately. And I think we gave them, 4 things. And to a couple people's credit, maybe 3 would have been better, but we erred on the side of going wide. And I'd probably do it again if we had to do it over.
Yeah. On that note, actually, if we had to do it over again, is there anything that you would change?
Honestly, we talked about that afterwards. I wish I would have highlighted a bit more about us meeting on Facebook. I called you my bright light online because of all the toxic stuff We mentioned this earlier, so I don't need to do it all again. But I'm glad I got a portion of that out. I wish I would have bulked that up just a little bit. But honestly, I don't know. I remember telling you, I think we did what we came to do.
I think so. And it's funny how quickly that hour went by. It just flew. Hopefully it flew as quickly for the people in the audience. But for you and me, I was like, all this anticipation, all these months, and then it's just over in like half a second.
That's one of the signs of a strength. Dr. Clifton details that in a book called Soar With Your Strengths, that sense of timelessness. When you lose track of time, that's a good sign. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to share about the summit, the experience, presenting with an Australian?
Well, people also need to know that you arrived for an Australian care package for me and my family, which was amazing. I think my daughter still sleeps with her little koala bear.
Oh, that's so cute.
And we're gonna put the dish towels in our new house, and that was very cool. And I've talked a little bit about just the connection around the globe and feeling part of a movement. And I guess that's what I'd say about the conference. For me, it's about the relationships, and it's about connecting with my former instructors and my former classmates that I took the certification with. And then from there, this little network that we've built up that gets added to that we're both in now. And for me, the thing that I love about it is, on the last podcast, we talked about this. I'm a pastor, and so most of the experiences I have in a group or conference session are connected to Christianity or connected to my job. And to be a part of something that isn't, that's really been one of the first times in my adult life where that's happened. And so that's very meaningful to me. I don't mean to take a hard emotional pivot here, but it felt so good to not have to be kind of shy about what I do for a living, because sometimes people treat me with suspicion when they find that out. And I understand why. But for me, I've never had a job that wasn't really connected to church. And so it felt so good. I hope this doesn't sound self-aggrandizing or boring.
No, it doesn't.
I guess what I'm saying, I got to contribute to this thing, and the fact that I was a pastor was somewhat connected to it, but it really didn't matter. And it felt good to contribute to something that people found valuable, or to be part of something in this movement, and to be able to be in conversation with your peers as fellow practitioners just felt great. And to do that with somebody who I met through the First Time Facilitator podcast on the big Facebook group for strengths, I just thought it was so cool. And it gave me a lot of hope for humanity, because it's pretty easy to get pessimistic about life online. So I think I texted you even as a part of that week, that was probably one of the top 10 experiences of my life. And I really appreciate everything you did to make that happen.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. And really, you're the one that really drove this. And I'm so grateful. And it was actually really nice of you as well. You extended, because you had your pre-existing network from previous conferences, the Shaunas and the Jens of the world. Shout out to them if they're listening. And it was just so nice to come to the conference and have a pre-made group of friends already there. And like you said, we brought in some more people, and we had a really great group. And to be at a conference which is purely focused on strengths, I just love it. And I've walked away, like I said, I keep saying, with strengths pumping through my veins now. So, and just even be able to connect with you and do what we did, it just shows you what is capable in the world. Things like this was a real pipe dream. This was really long shot, and it's happened. What else can happen? How cool.
I've thought, what are we going to do next?
Yeah. If any listeners out there have any ideas for things that Adam and I can do in the future, any continent, anywhere.
He flies me, I'll go wherever they want.
Yeah. We'll have to get you to Australia.
Oh man, Sarah, my wife and I are already talking about making it down to Brisbane.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
In the authentic way, not in the yeah way.
Oh, okay. But look, that yeah way actually happened, so
don't dismiss it. That's true.
Adam, thank you so much I know it's the 4th of July tomorrow where you are, and there's big fireworks celebrations happening tonight that you've just left to have this conversation. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you for everything that you do. And you've been an amazing partner in crime. And it's great that we could share everything that we spoke about, well, just our reflection on this, because it's the first time we've had a proper chat about it with our listeners, where it all started.
Appreciate you, friend. Can't wait to do something again.
Sounds good. Cheers. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight. And make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.